Hi, Kirsty.
Hi, Claire.
Thank you so much for joining.
It's really nice to be here. Really nice to be here.
So cool to see you.
And you?
So, for people who haven't met you or don't know about your work, would you be able to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Yeah, so my name's Kirsty Day. I have a history professionally and personally of working with trauma survivors, supporting trauma survivors to begin to kind of look at and understand what the longer term impacts of trauma are and to find some recovery from
Mhm.
those effects. Yeah, so in a nutshell, that's what I do. And I've done that probably for around the last 7 or 8 years now.
Brilliant. So, in the context of a global pandemic,
Yeah.
uh, first of all, how would you describe trauma? And in the context of a global pandemic and in the situation that we all find ourselves in, how does that relate to um, the definition of trauma?
Okay. So there are a couple of different ways to look at what trauma is. And I think ordinarily what happens is we try and define trauma in a really nice, neat box.
Yeah,
And we want to say it is this. And unfortunately, trauma doesn't actually work that way. So
yeah,
one definition, one way of looking at trauma is that it is an external situation that overwhelms a person's ability to cope.
yes,
Okay, now that's a very wide definition because external situation is not very specific
yes,
and person's ability to cope is not very specific either,
yeah,
which means that essentially trauma will leave an individual footprint essentially on a person's life. Now, what I may consider to be a trauma, another person may not. Two people can experience exactly the same thing, and depending on that ability to cope,
yes,
may experience it completely differently. And
yes.
the origins of the word trauma, it's from the Greek word traumat, and which means wound. Um,
Okay.
yeah,
Oh, I didn't
and
know that.
yeah, yeah. Actually, to be really honest with you, neither did I. My husband told me that about an hour ago.
Brilliant,
He's quite big on trauma and trauma informed working as well.
brilliant.
And I'd never looked into the origin of the word, and he told me that. And obviously, if you think about wound, a wound can be physical, it
Yes,
can be mental, and it can be emotional.
yes,
Yeah. So in the context of a global pandemic, um, there are some signature markers that provide a similarity between trauma and how people may be experiencing this pandemic now. If you think
yes,
about some of the key things that are usually present when trauma is occurring,
yes,
people usually feel overwhelmed, check,
yeah,
powerless,
yeah,
check, unable to control what is happening to them, check,
yeah,
unable to cope with it in a way that other people might be able to cope with it, check.
yeah,
Do you see where I'm going with this? So
yeah,
there are, even though there's a huge amount of solidarity and
yeah,
camaraderie right now and community, at the same time, we know that not everybody in society is handling this global pandemic the same.
yeah.
And there are some key markers that I can go into a little bit later on in the conversation with you, if that'd be helpful.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Mm-hmm.
So, my observation is that there are certain behaviours which we sort of embody when we experience trauma, and that those stay with us. Would you agree with that?
Um, yes, predominantly. We would call them trauma responses.
Okay.
So a situation comes along, it overwhelms a person's ability to cope. And in that moment, we utilize whatever we have available to us to survive. Okay,
Yeah.
so I won't go too deeply into trauma in the brain, but there's a huge amount of brain science around this. And essentially, something happens to us externally and it
Yeah.
filters through a part of the brain and it goes through like a sorting office. It's like a sorting office, and it's called the
Yes.
amygdala, this part of the
Yeah.
brain. And it deals with how do we respond. And usually we respond in one of 5 categories. A lot of people have heard of fight or flight. They're very common, but there are other trauma responses as well. So there's fight, flight, freeze, friend, or flop.
Yes.
And if you want me to give you a definition, a little brief definition of those, I can.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah? Okay,
Yeah.
so a fight response, and this is my natural response.
Yeah.
An overwhelming situation occurs,
Yeah.
and what I want to do is I want to overpower the threat.
Yes.
Therefore, the threat is under control and I am safe. Okay?
Yeah.
A flight response, I want to get as far away from the threat as I possibly can, and so I flee. Yeah, makes sense as well. Good sound, logical decision making. As I said, they're not. They're based. It's based in an emotional part of the brain.
Yeah.
Freeze is literally kind of what it says. And if you think about the animal world and predators, okay, so predators and prey. Sometimes it keeps a prey safe. So think about maybe like an eagle and a mouse. So an eagle is soaring up above, and a mouse is scurrying. And it's the movement that the predator can see. So if I freeze and I stay still, they might not see me, I'll be safe. That's the external picture. The internal picture with the freeze response looks a little bit different. A friend response. So this is the kind of response that we would ordinarily see in domestically abusive relationships and things like that. It's also known as a fawn response. And essentially the component of it is, if you are happy and we're friends, then I'm safe. You're not angry and you're not going to hurt me. And a flop response, the final one, is almost a total collapse. Total collapse, just boom, like my whole system is shut down. Total collapse. Again, if I'm not present, all of these things kind of one way or another relate to, if I'm not present, I'm safe.
Yes. And like you said, we don't have control over these because it's like the reptilian part of the brain. It's not the conscious decision making part of the brain. So that gets triggered. We get flooded with hormones. And then it's quite a hard climb out of those responses. Absolutely.
They exist for a reason. Many of them, they're primeval, they're hardwired into us, and they have been for years. You wouldn't ordinarily in a situation in the moment be able to override with logic and think, okay, maybe I shouldn't run from this situation. You would be halfway down the street before you even knew you were running. Okay, it's the brain coming back into its most primitive function, survival. So it's not logical, it's not rational, and for some people that can be really difficult to understand. I've spoken with many survivors of sexual assault over the years who couldn't understand why they didn't fight. Society tells us what we should and shouldn't do and how we should and shouldn't respond, and if fight response is not your response, that's okay. That doesn't mean you fell short, you didn't protect yourself. It means that based on the information you had available in the memory bank, the decision your brain made was whichever one it was to keep you safe.
So something else that I've observed is that, I suppose, for those of us who have experienced trauma and who have developed a habitual fight, flight, freeze response, then the trauma of this situation has, and on a daily basis, will send us back into that response. So that will affect our day-to-day communications with other people.
Absolutely. A trigger, so a trauma trigger is again, an external stimulus that sets off a response in a person, which, you know, we would call a trauma trigger. It can be a sight, a sound, a smell, a person, a place, a situation, having restricted movement,
Yeah.
feeling trapped, feeling
Yeah.
powerless, feeling helpless, feeling little, feeling small, feeling uncertain, feeling unsure. All of those things that, you know, it's almost like there's an elastic band that flicks back to the originating event. And
Yes.
when we respond in the moment, we're not necessarily responding to the trigger.
Yeah.
We're responding to the originating event. So,
Yeah.
you know, for example, you could have a situation whereby, you know, you're waiting in a queue for a shop, which is
Yeah.
a new, very common thing for most of us.
Yeah.
And you'll be able to see different people's responses in those cues. Now,
Yes.
for me personally, as I said, I have a fight response.
Yeah.
So when I'm trapped and I'm powerless and haven't got enough time and I'm supposed to be somewhere else and I've got to stand in these queues and people are getting too close to me and they're
Yeah.
not observing social distancing, and the response I want to have is entirely disproportionate and would probably be quite frightening and very worrying for anybody else in that queue.
Yeah.
Because everything in my brain says decimate this threat.
Yes.
Powerlessness doesn't equal safety for you. And so yeah, you know, a simpler thing as standing in a queue at a supermarket would have the power to, you know, to activate me up into that level. Why? Because it's those similar hallmarks. And when the brain uses that sorting system, the amygdala, it says,
Yeah.
where have we felt like this before?
Yeah.
Where have we, and how did we survive this? It's almost there's a lot more to it than that. I'm really simplifying, but essentially that's what it is. Where have we felt like this before? I remember where we felt like this before, and this is how we survived.
Yeah.
Let's go.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, anybody around me at that time is going to be absolutely horrified because
Yeah.
this woman is absolutely losing her mind in the queue
Yeah.
for no apparent reason.
Yes. For no apparent reason. And something that I've observed myself, I have observed a fair bit of social media over the last 9 weeks
Yes.
as I live alone and have been furloughed, and spend far too much time looking at my phone, because I think that's also a freeze response. Is that I've actually seen footage of a woman kicking off in a queue because she felt unsafe, because the man behind her she felt was standing too close. And I've seen the person behind the man filming her,
Yeah.
the man ridiculing her, and her being ridiculed on social media. And I'm thinking, she's in fight, flight, freeze response. All she needs is for the man to say, I'm really sorry, and step back a couple of paces, and maybe a woman to say, are you okay? Can I get you anything?
Deactivate
And
the
it's
threat.
it's kind of made me feel like we all need training in this.
Yeah. Yeah.
We all
I
need
mean,
training in
yeah. Society,
compassion.
yes. But we're trained to see the world through our own threat response lens.
Yes.
Right? So the difficulty with that is that if we essentially at our very base core are built to survive, there will be certain scenarios. So let's take that example you've just given.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's very clear when the lady said you're too close.
Yeah.
She's just given some very clear information about what the activation is. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, you know, there are questions that come up for me there. Okay, who got too close to you before?
Yes.
What happened when somebody got too close? You know, there are some obvious conclusions you would think.
That was
And then
exactly
let's
how
look
I
at,
felt.
yeah,
Exactly.
yeah. Now let's look at it from the male's perspective. Okay. So he's stood there potentially minding his own business.
Absolutely.
Not really understanding what 2 meters actually is, doesn't
Yeah.
realize he's too close. And
Yeah.
before he knows it, he has an infuriated woman in front of him and he's being publicly humiliated.
Oh, I didn't think about his point of view.
Right.
Oh, yes.
Mm-hmm. So he has someone in front of him. He doesn't know if she's going to attack him. She doesn't know if he's going to attack her. And what we have is a dual activation. His own fight or flight response would have been triggered also, which would have reduced his capacity to meet her need of space and to step back.
Oh, yes.
So
Oh,
yes, we all do need training in all of this, but also we always see from our own lens.
yes.
It's important to see from everybody else's lens.
That is such a good illustration of that. Yeah. Never occurred to me how he might have responded, right, and what might have been triggered in him.
Mm-hmm. For sure, for sure. You know,
wow.
There are men experience trauma too.
Yes.
Yeah.
And also I think for men in society at the moment, being accused of something that they're actually not is quite common and quite painful. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Wow, yes.
Yeah. So it's really important that if we start to develop our awareness of this, that we start to develop it across the board. Yeah. You know, that there are, I don't believe, you know, I live in a world where I believe that everybody gets up every day and tries to do their best. Okay. Yes. And, you know, so if I believe that and, you know, I come across a situation where that's not the case, one of my, you know, if we think about the wound analogy, yeah, what is the wound behind this behavior? What, yeah, you know, I don't believe that people start screaming at people in queues for no reason. There was an activating event that occurred somewhere that yes. made that lady unsafe when yes. a man was too close to her. Yeah. You know, I've given you the flip as well. Absolutely. But yeah, it's, you know, it's a really wide lens, and probably the most tricky response to be on the receiving end of is a fight response, because yeah. it's it will activate our own fight or flight responses. Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, it's very tricky.
Yeah, absolutely. Mm. So I've actually written notes about this because it's quite specific. Mm-hmm. So having experienced a trauma, so we've all experienced a trauma, which is, wow, I didn't see this coming. There's a global pandemic. All of the rules have changed. Uh-huh. Every aspect of my life has changed, whether I'm working or whether I'm at home, the way I socialize, the way I shop, the way I communicate, the way I exercise, everything has changed. That is a trauma to me. Mm-hmm. So having acknowledged that, how do I live in love, not fear? And how do I stop judging others?
Okay. So having acknowledged that, I think the acknowledgement has to go just a little bit further. And what I mean by that is we adapt to cope. So for example, you know, if every time I go to the supermarket, I end up feeling threatened and unsafe, yes. what I'm highly likely to do is avoid the supermarket. Mm. I adapt to cope. I learn that place there is associated with danger for me, so I'm going to stop going. So first and foremost, you know, we've probably had, if you think about what this pandemic has done, it's taken away a lot of the things that make us feel safe. Yes. Like if trauma is experienced sometimes suddenly, yes, routine gives us safety. Yes. If it's overwhelming, then predictability gives us safety. That's everything we've had taken from us right now. Yes. No predictability, no safety. Yeah. And so, you know, what we'll do and what we have done, I've seen it all across my own social media, is we adapt to cope. I can't tell you how many people I've seen, and I am absolutely one of these. I'm on the addressing it end of the spectrum at the moment. You know, we've increased our food consumption. Yeah. Many people are doing that, and I think what we're doing is we're trying to soothe ourselves. Yeah, that's what we're trying to do. Yeah. We're not, you know, there's a bit of freedom, and I think there was a little bit of, for some people, there was a little bit of excitement. I don't have to go to work, and you know, in the very early stages of this, that might have been the case for some people.
Absolutely.
will have filled them with terror.
Yes.
You know, so firstly, understand the way that you've adapted. Is
Yeah.
it healthy or is it unhealthy?
Yeah.
But as you said earlier about social media, you know, the I've been on social media quite a lot recently. I've been speaking quite a lot, and if I'm honest, I'm tired now, and I know. So you know, I borrowed a friend's hot tub, and
Nice.
that's the current method. You know, they're very expensive. I couldn't afford one, but she, you know,
Nice.
kindly lent me it so that I could just take that time to. So I understood that I was adapting, and I'm still working as well. You
Yes.
know, and I'm
Yeah.
working in a different way with different pressure, and
Yeah.
it took me a minute to adapt to that in a healthy way.
Yes.
There were some unhealthy things that crept in as well.
Yeah.
So, you know, to bring that love in is understand that we are in unprecedented times.
Mm.
There's never been anything like it in our modern day and age.
Mm.
You know, with all of the facilities that we have now and the way that it's unprecedented.
Yeah.
And so the first and most important message has to be whatever you're doing is good enough.
Yeah.
You know, because social media, there's lots filtering in about how we should and shouldn't. I can't tell you how many should and shouldn'ts I've hidden from my newsfeed, because you know, the reality is, if I get up today and I get dressed and I comb my hair and I brush my teeth and I slob around in pajamas all day and I eat terrible food, that has to be okay too.
Yes.
That has to be okay. You know,
Yeah.
everybody copes the best that they can, and that first and foremost is the foundation for the love. I think the healthy bits come after that,
Yeah.
but the foundation is it's okay. This is unprecedented. I'm
Yeah.
doing the best I can with what I've got.
Yeah. And I'm just gonna give myself a little bit of love and let
Mm-hmm.
myself off the hook of
Mm-hmm.
all of the things that I think I should be doing. Stop
Yeah.
shoulding on myself.
Don't should yourself. It's the worst.
It's the
It
worst.
really is.
It's the worst
It's
in normal times.
yeah, you know, it absolutely is, because everybody's coping differently. I know that a lot of my friends who are parents are struggling with schooling, and
Yeah.
then they're seeing, you know, the fair play to them, the kind of the parents that are have got home education on lock.
Yeah.
um Not everybody has, and
Yeah.
again, that has to be okay as well. Like,
Yes.
everybody's coping within their own coping capacity, and
Yeah.
that has to be okay. That
Yeah.
has to be okay.
Absolutely.
You know,
Absolutely.
you asked about judging others as well.
Yeah, I've been so judgmental in my head.
Yeah, so
Well,
maybe
I've verbalized it a bit on occasion.
mhm. So you know, maybe that kind of fight response, and you know, maybe we get our sense of control by ordering the world in our mind, and when anybody comes up against the order of the world in our mind, it's helpful to remind them that they're falling short of the order of the world in our mind, except it's not, because our version of the world is in our mind.
Yeah, that's
One,
so
they don't
true.
know. They
That's
don't know.
so true.
Mm-hmm.
Because I've noticed what my responses are. So they're like, my default patterns are like, first of all, denial.
Mm-hmm.
No, it's fine. It's fine. Everything's fine.
Mm-hmm.
I don't need to adhere to any of the measures because everything's fine. Although obviously I do and
Mm-hmm.
have
Mm-hmm.
stayed home for weeks and
Yeah.
weeks and weeks and weeks, like everyone.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But like that denial is there. And then there's like cheerfulness, like la 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 la. They're both the same thing, really.
Mm-hmm.
Like if I'm really good and smile, everything will be okay.
Yeah.
Which is, I guess, is the fawn behavior, isn't it? The fawn
For
response.
sure. For
Yeah.
sure.
And then there's like the flippant comments, disregarding other people's points of view, which is kind of fight,
Yeah.
but in a
Absolutely.
kind of underhand way.
Yeah.
And then there's defiance against authority, which is quite a tricky time to be defiant against authority.
For sure. For sure.
Tiring.
Yeah. Of course. You
Yeah.
know, but all of those all of those responses come from somewhere. You didn't put your hand in the trauma response bucket and pull out a random.
That's
At
so
some
true.
point, somewhere in your life, those things have worked for you.
Yeah. Those things would have been very effective in some situations in my life.
Right, right.
Yeah.
They're not random. We have our own blueprint of responses that are stored as working responses. This works.
Yeah.
And the problem is in the here and now is that they may have been great for the original situation. They're usually not great 10 or 20 or 30 years later because
Yeah.
so much has changed in our lives.
Yes.
Mm.
Yes. And trying to stay in the prefrontal cortex whilst being out shopping, I find really majorly demanding.
Uh-huh.
I have to pause because I can feel myself going off.
Mm-hmm.
Like today, I said to someone, I was doing some shopping for my mum. So I pulled the trolley up to the checkout, and I had already been very carefully pausing so that people who were nervous about getting too close could have loads of space because I wasn't in a hurry.
Amazing.
So I've been like really generous already, don't you know? So, so I got to the checkout and I was like, oh, hi, yeah, I've got 14 geraniums. And the person on the checkout said, please pull your trolley to the front of the checkout and go back and stand on the green dot. And I was like, fuck, does she think she's talking? That's what I thought in my mind. And then I was like, no, be kind because she's more at risk because she is working at a checkout, seeing hundreds of people every day.
Coming through, yeah.
She's more at risk of infection. And that's what's on her mind. So I will, in fact, stand on the green dot, even though I don't think there should be a fucking green dot.
Yeah.
And I behaved myself. So I did. But it is hard work.
Of course. And you know, for the lady at the checkout, the same way, she will have had, so you know, there's government guidance, there's the guidance of her employer, the knowledge for her that if she doesn't adhere to the guidance, not only is her employment at risk, her employer is at risk of being able for the business to actually open. And so for her safety, what she'll do is absolute compliance. A really similar thing happened to me last night. I went to a supermarket local to me. It wasn't one I'd been in before. I'd been going to other ones, and you know, there weren't arrows on the aisles, and it was tricky, and I was already quite stressed by the time I got to the checkout. And I'd done a big shop, which I've avoided for pretty much most of this time, but you know, it's expensive not to keep buying in small amounts. And I was loading up onto the conveyor belt, and the checkout lady, she moved the conveyor belt down, so I moved down with it, and she told me off. And right, and so my first response is, well, that's a trigger.
Yeah.
Public humiliation is I mean, it's not that public. There's probably like 4 people around, but in my head, there's a stadium of people that can see my shame right now. And
thousands of people looking on at my raw shame.
And I just looked at the lady. Yeah, and I just thought, it's fear. We will all manage this fear in the best way we can. And if me not getting shirty with this woman and just stepping back, I apologize. I said I misunderstood. I thought I could move down with the no, it's 2 meters. Okay, understood. Thank you so much. You know, and just step back and I thought, you know, maybe I'll be the only compliant customer that she doesn't get shot a dirty look from today. And maybe I'll bring a bit of kindness into her life.
Yeah, and that's what I try really hard to be. However I respond inwardly, and even if it shows, I try to become the kind, friendly customer who's really grateful.
Yeah, and that's, you know, that's not always easy. As I said, my response is no, my response, my natural response is a fight response.
Yeah.
You know, so does it always look like that? No. Can I always grab it like that? No, that's hardwired in. You know, I work with trauma. I am a trauma survivor myself. You know, I have a adverse childhood experience score. For those who are familiar with what that is, I have a score of 10.
Okay.
I hit every single marker on that. So when I respond strongly. You know, over the years, I've learned this information soothes me just as much. You know, I tried to educate myself in what my responses were about.
Yeah.
Why do I respond like, why do I respond at DEFCON 10 for a
Yeah.
DEFCON 1 situation? I embarrass myself,
Yeah.
you know? And
Yeah.
it's a long road, it's a very tough road, and self-compassion is
Yeah.
incredibly hard. It's not a natural state for me by any
Yeah.
stretch of the imagination. You
Yeah.
know, if I have a fight response with others, I have a fight response with me also.
Yeah.
You know, so usually that inner critic
Yes.
is what comes online first. And, you
Yeah.
know, we can't
Yeah.
get it right all the time. We're
Yeah.
not perfect. And that has to be okay. Has
Yeah.
to be.
Yeah. And I think I don't think I've ever heard mental health being spoken about as much as I have in the last couple of months.
For
And
sure.
I think that has to be a positive thing for us all
It
to
is.
have
Yeah.
some understanding that
Mm-hmm.
all of these phrases that we share all the time, like everyone's fighting their own battle, and but actually
Yeah.
that we are all,
Mm-hmm.
and I love this concept that everybody is doing their best.
For sure. For sure. It's, you know, it the problem with mental health and trauma is usually that we can only identify its presence because it's internal. It
Mm,
doesn't exist on the outside. So we
yeah.
can only identify its presence when it spills out.
Yes.
Usually, you know, if someone is unwell or in a trauma response, it spills out in a way that we as society say is unacceptable
Mm,
and is against the rules, and it's not on the green dot.
yeah.
And that needs to stop, and they need to be medicated, and that needs to be addressed. You see?
That's so true. And I don't feel like laughter is an appropriate response to that.
No, but
But
yeah,
it's so true.
yeah.
It's so
We're so
true.
hardwired to judge.
We are so hardwired to judge.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And if there's, I feel that if there's one good thing to come out of this situation, it's love and tolerance.
For sure. For sure.
Like,
I've heard lots about community
yes.
in this. I've you know, some beautiful examples of community, and there is a way of looking at this pandemic as an opportunity. I saw a little meme on Facebook a few weeks ago that really provoked me, and it said, you know, before you run to return to normal, maybe think about which elements of normal are worth returning to.
So true.
I just thought that's so I actually have an opportunity to redefine my normal right now.
Yeah. So
I
true.
hadn't looked at it like that. This was something that was being perpetrated against me, this pandemic and lockdown. And
Same.
I'm right. And but to see, okay, no, this is a space and time to redefine normal for me,
Yeah.
takes it from a perpetrated act to a beautiful opportunity. And all of a sudden, I am empowered again.
Yes.
I'm not being done to.
Yes.
Mm.
Yes. And at the moment in lockdown, when I have managed to empower myself, use really good choices in the way that, because I'm not working, although I
Mm.
am engaged in some activities which could be considered work, but my day to day is different. Um, in those times that I've managed to feel empowered through my own choices and actions, I have felt like this is fantastic. There's so much space and time for growth here.
Right.
But I can still revert back to exactly that, which I
Mm-hmm.
hadn't managed to articulate, feeling like this has been done to me. I'm
Yeah.
locked in here. And
Mm-hmm.
when I feel I'm locked in here, I can't even go out for a walk.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the ways that this could be looked at, and I'm sure there are scholars far greater than I. I'm not a scholar, by the way, but
Mm.
I'm pretty sure that at some point we will start to see the global effect of this collective trauma. There are many, you know, and I'm not going to liken this pandemic to any other collective trauma.
No.
But there are many that we speak of far beyond their end date. You know, because this is not just about lockdown. There are lives lost here. There are lives lost. There is a culture of fear. Fear is what's bringing us safety, you know, and
Yes.
I am a healthy respecter of every government guideline. You know,
Yeah.
I have to be honest, in the very, very, very beginning, pre-coronavirus landing here in the UK, I was a little bit, you know, I have a friend who was very, very aware of this early, and I was a little bit like, you know, I think your response is a little dramatic. I don't, you know, and
That's
then
what
I
I was
ended up,
like.
I was exactly the same. And then I educated myself and
Yeah.
got a healthy respect for, you know, what is around. And the problem is this is an invisible threat.
Yes.
Every surface, every item, every person is a threat to us right now, even those we love.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which, you know, from an activation perspective, our systems just probably don't have a clue how. You can't fight it because it's
Yes.
invisible. You can't run away from it because they've locked us down.
Yeah.
You can't make friends with it because it mutates.
Yes.
You can't collapse because it could get you anyway. You can't. So we're kind of forced into this almost freeze response. It's the only thing available to us, you know, and but it's a forced response. It's not, maybe it's not our natural response, you know. So it's a scary time, and there's a lot of fear, you know, and a lot of different responses to it that are sometimes harmful to us, sometimes harmful to others, you know.
Yes. Absolutely.
I noticed about 3 or 4 weeks in that I was I was more argumentative. You know, you were talking about social media, and I'd noticed that non-irritants, it just wasn't even an irritant, it became an irritant, you
Yes.
know. And again,
Absolutely. I've
it's a
noticed
fight
that a lot.
response. Mm-hmm.
And I've noticed that sitting looking at my phone, it just does not do anything for me.
Well, it's a form of numbing.
It's a form of numbing which kind of seems to create some sort of head chaos.
For sure. It's think
Whereas,
about the stimulus of
yeah,
scrolling. Do you know what I mean? Think about the stimulus, scrolling. You know, a lot of people are doing a lot of digital meetings. People are working from home, and
yeah,
the way that stimulus works is it's very tricky. We can't, you know, we don't have access to people's ordinary facial expressions. We're a lot
yes,
less expressionate on, you know, digital platforms, and
yeah,
it's exhausting.
yeah.
It's
We
really
don't have the
tiring.
visual cues. Like in
No,
a
we don't.
conversation like this, we wouldn't normally talk over each other,
Yeah.
but we don't have the visual cues to have a proper conversation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
we were talking about that beforehand, weren't we?
Uh-huh. Yeah,
And how fatiguing it is being on Zoom meetings.
absolutely. Absolutely. And
Yeah,
what the brain does is, you know, it starts to go into overdrive to try and seek those cues. And, you know, on a Zoom meeting, depending on the type of meeting that you're in,
yeah,
but you'll be seeing, you know, say that there were 100 people, you can normally see maybe 50 on your screen, depending on the
yes,
device that you're using.
yeah,
That's 50 different movements that your eye is being caught to, and that your brain is trying to process and
yeah,
assess. Is this a threat? Is this? It's exhausting.
yeah. And I'm teaching yoga on Zoom, and it's I can't watch everyone doing yoga while I do yoga on Zoom. It's really
Yeah,
hard to watch.
for sure.
And then I can feel in the middle of a lesson like I'm just talking to myself, like there's nobody there at all. And then I have to look at the screen and remind myself that I am teaching real people and that they are just there.
Yeah.
It's really strange.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. It is.
Tiring.
Uh-huh.
I'm tiring. So if we come from a place of accepting that we have all experienced some sort of trauma by being alive in the time of a pandemic, then how can we heal this trauma, and how does our healing affect those around us?
Okay, so firstly, not everybody would accept that this is a trauma.
Oh, that's
Okay,
interesting.
yeah, not everybody would accept that this is a trauma. You know, I've spoken with many trauma survivors over the years, and denial is the major component of safety. I'm
Oh,
safe because this didn't happen to me. You know, so not, and here's the other thing. If trauma is an external threat that overwhelms a person's ability to cope, if you have high resilience and a high ability to cope, this wouldn't necessarily register as a trauma for you. So for some, it will sit in that category. For those who sorry, say that again.
That's really interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. So not everybody will experience it the same way. And those that do and are experiencing this as a trauma, healing trauma is it's a long process. It's not an easy road by any stretch of the imagination. You know, I would always personally recommend therapy as part of that process. And you know, some of the basics, learning to regulate your breathing is absolutely huge. There's so much on social media, on YouTube, around breathing, regulating the central nervous system, the parasympathetic nervous system. You know, have a look into that. Definitely do some breath work. Big fan of that. Self-care, treating yourself as though you're not the enemy. That's also a good start.
I love that. So now my new thing is I treat myself as a welcome guest in my home.
Lovely.
Would you like a lovely bath, Claire? Oh, yes, please. Would you like some nice bubble bath in it? Oh, that would be lovely.
I love that.
As mad as it sounds, would you like me to hang the bath on the towel rail and warm it out for you? Yes, please, self.
Love that.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. That's really good. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, you know, in terms of how when we start to heal from trauma, usually the way that we adapt to survive trauma, oftentimes it's their unhelpful ways and they spill out. You know, I know that, you know, if I look at myself as a parent, as a wife, as a professional, you know, has trauma spilled out into those areas without a shadow of a doubt. That's how we end up with generational trauma. Okay. So, you know, I adapt to survive that which I experienced, sometimes reperpetrate it. That can be a part of it. You know, I may manage to adapt and overcome in time that the next generational chain isn't made. You know, so we can become a light to those around us, and we can reduce how much we trigger them when we start to heal.
Because I think for me, my argumentative nature, which comes out, it only serves to trigger other people.
Yeah, for sure.
However much I think, oh, I'm just being open-minded. Well, I'm not being that open-minded because I can't let them have their opinion. Yeah.
You know, there are some ugly hallmarks of surviving trauma. You know, you know, not to part of my healing journey. You know, and I am a better woman than I was. I know that. But rage has been an absolute thing in my life, and it's kept me safe. I made a decision somewhere at some point that nobody was ever going to hurt me again. But I lost my ability to discern appropriately when somebody was trying to hurt me and when they weren't. You know, it's a long process, you know, so just trying and doing our best and reducing triggers for others, you know, acknowledging when we're falling short is a huge thing, you know. And just get up tomorrow and try and be better and do better. And if you can't, that has to be okay. Has to be.
Absolutely. I love that. Get up and try and be better and do better. And if you can't be, that's okay. Yeah. I think that's a perfect motto for life. Because even if today went really badly, or there was a situation today that went really badly, and it's not possible to in any way undo that because we don't know the people who were involved, then we can just try again tomorrow.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that is giving ourselves self-compassion.
For sure. You know, I don't believe anybody wakes up and decides that they're going to perpetuate darkness on those around them. I think things happen, situations occur, you know, and you know, people usually inherently don't have that intent.
Yes.
You know, so obviously some people do. I'm not talking about every situation, but
yes.
I don't think of the world in that way. Something will have been an activating event for that response.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice. Well, thank you, Kirsty.
My pleasure.
This has been a really lovely conversation.
Thanks so much for inviting me.
It's not something which is openly discussed very much. And I think it's so relevant to so many people. And yeah, I just think the more information there is for people, then the more chance people have got of feeling okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome. My pleasure.
Thank you so much. And thank you for giving up some time when, you know, you're really busy at work.
Yeah. It's okay. Yeah. It's, as you said, it's really important, you know, so.
Yeah. It is really important. Yeah.
Yeah. So hopefully somebody somewhere will recognize themselves in what I've said, and it will be of use to somebody, and that makes it all worth it.
Yeah.
Or even if somebody else just realizes that they're not on their own and that their responses fit a mold and there's not something wrong with them, and this is perfectly reasonable responses to really unreasonable things.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you, Kirsty.
All right, my lovely.
Have a lovely evening.
And you, take care.
Yeah, take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.